Thank the god of the Edo, or otherwise, for small blessings and dressings. There have been no very short treks this year. The animated line must be drawn here, this far, no further fart jokes. On the whole, 2024 has been another great year for Star Trek content. See our other video coming up, the greatest moments list for that. However, like the assimilation policy of the Borg, there's always room for improvement. History might judge 2024 as the age of endings. Never before have two Star Trek series had their finale in the same year. Star Trek Discovery aired its final episode in May. Star Trek Lower Decks has done the same now in December. Sadly, with no news looking more and more like bad news for Star Trek Prodigy, that number might also be 3. From ending to never ending, we had lengthy real-world high-stakes mergers this year. We were also tantalised by a fantasy coupling with another franchise that may not come to fruition. Elsewhere, we were more than just teased. We were completely spoiled by spoilers. And in the end, if we are finding fault, it's only because we're having so much fun. As the Doctor once said to 7 of 9, this journey certainly hasn't lacked excitement. I can't complain about being bored. Bad for Star Trek isn't the worst thing in the world. I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are the 10 worst Star Trek moments in 2024. Number 10. 5 is an odd caterpillar. Star Trek Discovery's cancellation was last year's news. Star Trek Enterprise +1 all over again. This year saw its 5th and final season hit the upload. Caught off guard as much as the rest of us by the premature end, producers and actors had hurried to wrap up with a coda to life itself. It wasn't These Are the Voyages, far from it, but it was over. As on Ferenginar, when it rains, it pours. On the 12th of April came the announcement that Star Trek Lower Decks would also be airing its final episode this year. 5 seasons of any series these days seems like a miracle, noted Mike McMahon and Alex Kurtzman in their message to the fans. With the way of the streaming world and everything over at Paramount, we'd be lucky to ever get that back to 7. Lower Decks might yet beat the odds with a movie in live action or by finding a home elsewhere. At least the end seems to be a partial synonym for metamorphosis. One series simply mutates into another, like Star Trek Starfleet Academy and the Tawny Newsom Justin Simeon comedy spin-off. In any case, great news for the new is still a shame for those of us who weren't done admiring the caterpillar. Number 9. Epiphanies interrupted. The end of Star Trek Discovery had some unintended side effects. As a Doctor, Culber should have at least been used to those. His Season 5 arc was arguably ill-handled in the first place. It was clearly destined for more exploration. Culber's Epiphany interrupted post-Jinal was emblematic of a series cancelled before its time. Like others around him, Hugh wasn't the only one left hanging on the edge of something more by the end of life itself. Husband Stamets had the spore drive pulled from beneath him in favour of Pathway. He didn't even get to play around with the progenitors. Speaking of marriages, we did get to witness one wedding, but what happened next for the newlyweds? We might never know. And not to forget Kovic, newly revealed as Daniels all along, and Moll, sorry Locke. There was the coda for Burnham and Booker, but a lot had been skipped in between. Wilson Cruz couldn't be there in person for the epilogue, fully understandable, if a little uncanny. Some of those who already will teach at Starfleet Academy. Tilly, Vance and Reno are confirmed to reappear, to teach or otherwise. As for the rest, whatever grander realizations were around the corner might be lost to us. In Culber's case, perhaps Jinal decided to stick around for more than just subspace resonance frequencies. You certainly have the makings of one hell of a professor. Just saying, maybe the interruption is merely a sabbatical. Number 8. World Ampersand Day. The 8th of September is World Ampersand Day, honouring that curious little character you'll probably find above the 7 if you have a QWERTY keyboard. 8th of September also happens to be Star Trek Day, marking the date of the US premiere of The Man Trap in 1966. Star Trek Day was only given Paramount officialdom in 2020. Since then, it has typically been celebrated with pomp, pandemic permitting, reveals, teasers, tributes, live streams, and charitable efforts via the #StarTrekUnitedGives campaign. This year, the ampersand was more directly on display. Like an improv comic seeking a reply, we were all left asking, yes, and? Laudable but lackluster, 2024's Take the Chair, Make an Impact was essentially left up to the fans. What would I do if I were setting the course for the future, we were asked. Probably plan this day a little more effort. Star Trek Prodigy was also largely ignored again, so the writers had a pizza party instead. If you were anywhere near Chicago on the 8th of September, you could actually sit in a captain's chair, which at least looked like the real OG Enterprise thing. Those set up in Berlin and Vancouver were promoted as being crafted from sustainable materials. That, however, was a woefully fancy way of saying cardboard. Don't worry, you could still get a limited edition enamel pen. And if anyone remembers what happened on First Contact Day this year, send your answers on a postcard to that place in Montana. Number 7, the Skydance Dance. Will they, won't they? Will they, won't they? The paso doble between Paramount Global and Skydance Media this year was definitely not 10s across the board from the judges. The board of directors weren't giving high marks either at times, and we were just bored. Talks were had, deals were made, terms agreed upon, reneged upon, renegotiated. Bob Bakish, CEO of Paramount Global, stepped down. Rival bidders like Warner Bros, Discovery, Apollo Global Management and Sony Pictures dropped in and out of the race. Paramount and Skydance have now settled on a definitive agreement to merge, although we've heard that before. From the press release, dated the 7th of July 2024, atop the Starry Mountain itself, Ellison family and Redbird Capital Partners to invest over $8 billion in new Paramount and to acquire National Amusements Inc. It's not over until the two have shared warp fields. Even then, still a bumpy ride. The 45-day go-shop period in the agreement that allowed Paramount to seek out other offers is over, but the Skydance deal is not expected to close, if it does, until sometime during the first 6 months of 2025. It's worth noting that Star Trek is not mentioned once in Paramount's July press release. Star Wars is mentioned twice. Nevertheless, Skydance has a vested interest in Trek, having co-produced Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek Beyond. That's not to forget the ever-elusive Star Trek IV. Number 6. Time bugs for all. If you barge your way onto the bridge from the future, you'd better have a damn good explanation. Chakotay did in Shattered and was promptly arrested. In Face the Strange, Captain Burnham had to fight her former self before she could step back on and off the turbolift. Unlike Captain Janeway, it didn't take much to convince Arium, back from the not yet dead, to play along. The truth of her impending demise was inexplicably easier to believe than a good old-fashioned lie. That Krenim chronophage has been buggy for everyone. Face the Strange might as well be the leitmotif of this entire year. The episode itself feels like it aired ages ago. Cancelled after the fact, Star Trek Discovery's 5th and final season was, at times, impossibly prescient. Then there were those other faces missing, not knowing that time was running out. After Mirrors, Commanders Oosakon and Detmer took the very long way around to Federation HQ's storage with the ISS Enterprise. As showrunner Michelle Paradise noted on Twitter in May, both Oyin Oladejo and Emily Coutts had other projects during that time, so we got them when we could. Saru was also absent from several episodes of Season 5. As Doug Jones revealed to Cinema Blend's Mick Jost, he had asked if there was a way to lessen the load after Season 4 so he could spend some more time with his wife. Number 5. It's not happening. Don't adjust your ocular implants, we've not reverted back to Bevan Riker in Worst Contact, the very short trek. Snot was still the theme, however. The first episode of this year's new Doctor Who, Space Babies, was full of it. The bogeyman was bogies. Very clever and very gross, Mr. Davis. Before the sheer mavity of mucus kicked in, there was a direct mention of Star Trek from companion Ruby Sunday. We got to visit them, i.e. the Star Trek lot, one day, the Doctor replied, implying that Trekverse and Whoniverse occupied some sort of similar space-time. We better keep throwing salt over our shoulder at the end of the universe for good luck. In spite of tantalising nods and whispered promises, the two franchises have yet to merge into anything of substance, snot or otherwise. Going into the Intergalactic Friendship panel, Star Trek and Doctor Who, at San Diego Comic-Con in July, we still had cause to get our hopes up. We shouldn't have. The conversation between Russell T and Alex Kurtzman was lovely, very amicable in fact. What it wasn't was the crossover news we were looking for, but a limited time free-to-play mobile video game event spanning Star Trek Lower Decks, The Badgie Directive, and Doctor Who Lost in Time. Allons-y? Allons... no. Number 4. Una all over again. Warning, spoiler alerts for this one and the next entry. Paramount has a curious history of releasing clips for Star Trek Strange New Worlds which tell us more than we really should or should want to know. The official trailer for Season 2 showed Una in uniform on the bridge and on Krolmuth B, that is to say, not in prison. The first look clip for Season 3 featured a healthy, happy-ish La'an, that is to say, not gorged on by Gorn. Naturally, there's a lot of pressure to keep fans interested. The wait between seasons has also been longer than normal this time. However, and not to phaser ourselves in the foot here, or look a gift replicator in the gel pack, are we so avid for content that we have to have the plot plundered in advance? Is patience just a virtue to be scrolled through? In its haste, Paramount then re-offended at New York Comic Con. The second season of Strange New Worlds ended on a cliffhanger, the apparent indecision of Captain Pike faced with a Cornelian dilemma. Should he stay to rescue his crew or follow orders and go? In the NYCC exclusive clip, we found out what Pike did immediately next after the end of Hegemony. It didn't give the whole Gorn game away, and it was certainly thrilling. Just now, like a Gorn hatching from its parasitic egg, the tension has been broken from the start. Number 3. Real McCoys. For all of its post-Gorn spoilers, the first look clip for Strange New Worlds Season 3 was already an odd choice to release in advance. Now, we must address the Vulcans in the room. The effects of the Kirkovian serum were funny at first as the transformations kicked in. Carol Kane's Pelia was as hilarious as we've come to expect. Unlike the serum, however, the joke soon wore pretty thin. Let's all bully Spock like in the good old days that haven't happened yet. Down the line, Dr. McCoy would get away with insulting the half-Vulcan, half-human, every which way to 40 Eridani A. In the first look clip, the newly real Deals had barely stood up from toes to ears so pointy than they were laying on the verbal lashings and the Lurpa. With Pike, Uhura, Chapel and La'an fully Vulcanized, hair like hardened rubber, the Spock bashing came thick and fast. Spock is only half Vulcan, whereas the four of us are fully Vulcan. Oh, go hug a wild sailor. Of course, the point was, we'd hoped to point it out, the bullying and the xenophobia, that is. Ultimately, it might be wrong to glaze over that unfortunate fact from the original series. It's also already par for the course being set in Strange New Worlds. In Season 2, for example, Spock was pulled apart by mother-in-law-to-be, or not, T'Pris for not being Vulcan enough. When it came to getting crap from his transformed crewmates, however, 4.5 from 0.5 was exactly 9 times too much. Number 2. Leaving a legacy. The buzz that followed the next generation's The Last Generation was electric. Fans clamoured for a continuation on the Enterprise G in the form of Star Trek Legacy. Well, over a year later, that buzz has become a little electrostatic, although that might just be the carpet. The lack of legacy featured on 2023's version of this list. Back on it in 2024, the absence is turning into an unfortunate yearly tradition. The concept hasn't lost its appeal amongst the cast of Star Trek Picard. In October this year, LeVar Burton told TV Line that they were just as interested in the idea of legacy as when Picard was just airing. At SpaceCon 2024 via Trek Movie, Jerry Ryan surprised us all by revealing that she had turned down a pitch for a Captain 7 show, in part because it wasn't legacy. Never say never, she added. At the same event, Michelle Hurd noted that Jerry and I both want legacy so badly. Earlier this year, the Spock dead Todd Stashwick told Trek Movie that he was hopeful because he would love to keep telling stories. In the TV Line interview, Burton did admit that legacy was unlikely, whilst focus was elsewhere on other shows in the franchise. Meanwhile, as production lingers for Star Trek Starfleet Academy, Otoy have demonstrated how misguided it was to pass up on a legacy project. 765874 Unification has now surpassed 5 million views on YouTube, without Paramount's marketing machine behind it. Behind the scenes, the creatives, like Terry Matalas and Dave Blass, have also moved on to other projects. They'd surely return in a Bolian's heartbeat. After all, we'd rather like to switch legacy to greatest moments next year. Number 1. How many planes does it take, Admiral? Don't be Egypts here, Kate Mulgrew noted to Cinema Blend's Mick Jost at the San Diego Comic-Con in July. That was her broad, but decidedly accurate, summary of the banner flown over Netflix's offices in Los Angeles in August 2023. No fools the first time the streaming giant picked up Star Trek Prodigy for Season 2. Yet in spite of everyone's best efforts, a second plane in particular, and one of the best outings of contemporary Star Trek, we're still suffering the lack of Season 3 news ungladly. Nothing from Netflix this time, more fool them. Does the Admiral need to send in a whole fleet of light aircraft followed by a squadron of shuttles? It is unquestionably superior, Mulgrew went on to add to Jost. He'd have a hard time convincing us otherwise. Critical and fan praise for Prodigy's second season was overwhelming. At the time of recording, Season 2 has a 100% approval rate on the famous tomato meter and 96 on the popcorn meter. Even its IMDb score never drops below 7.6, which is more than can be said for the second seasons of some other Star Trek shows. Art is seemingly little more than an excuse for viewing figures. It has been like that for some time. But when everything is measured, the immeasurable is lost. How many planes will it really take? Infinite and none? All we can do now is hope. Pie instead in the sky, and hope is not a foolish thing. We all need a lot of it in 2025 anyway. Thank you so much for watching along, folks. We hope you enjoyed this. Now don't forget, there's a greatest moments list coming as well, so just don't think that we're so dour on everything. You can check out the original article that this was based on. That's over on whatculture.com. It was written by Jack Kiley. I have been Sean. You can follow us at TrekCulture on the various socials. I have been at Sean Ferrick on the various socials. Until I see you again, look after yourself, be kind to yourself, and live long and prosper. Thanks very much.